Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course I'm here with John Doull, and we are going to talk about the US election, so this should be fun. Okay, so I have a few theories myself, actually, and I know we might slightly disagree on a few things here, but I've noticed that a lot of people who say that they're not statists and that they're against statism have been big supporters of Donald Trump this election. Now, I actually agree with about 85% of what Donald Trump says, actually. I mean, he's actually not that bad, but I think the establishment knows better by now than to give us someone who's obviously, criminal, like Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump has been a part of the establishment for many, many, many years, and I believe that he is the new puppet. You know what I mean? He's the new guy that they're going to bring in to fool all of us anti-statist kind of people, and I think they've been doing a good job of it. I think that considering the fact that Donald Trump says a lot of great things, I think that's all good. I think Obama said a lot of things in 2007 and 2008 that a lot of people, including ourselves, would agree with, like ending the war. Yeah, ending the war, and I just think that Donald Trump is the next puppet. I think the CIA and the establishment are smarter than we give them credit for. I think that there's no doubt about it that they could fool us with this new candidate who might sound like he's coming out against the establishment. And I've looked at a lot of footage online of Hillary Clinton seemingly getting confronted by Black Lives Matter protesters, and a lot of these protesters are good people, but I will say and put it out there that they are largely George Soros funded kind of group, and that they are kind of infiltrated or co-opted by the CIA, like a lot of activist groups in the past, like Occupy, like the Tea Party, from both sides of the spectrum. It's a policy of government to basically infiltrate activist groups that start off maybe with a good message but just turn into complete shills. The idea that people in retaliation against mass incarceration, which obviously does exist, to burn down innocent black people's businesses as well. And for people to say that that's all good while calling like Lavoy Finicum and people of that nature terrorists, it's really quite sad and alarming that we've come to this point. So I wanted to basically talk about what you and I think about this whole election, because I think that once again we're walking right into the barrel of the New World Order here. I think that there's a lot of examples that we could bring up, and I know a lot of people are saying, well, what about Bernie Sanders? He's anti-establishment. No, he isn't. He's not anti-establishment. That's why, people on Wall Street, if you talk to them, a lot of them will say that they support Bernie Sanders because it allows these monopolies to keep up. Like Bernie Sanders saying, for example, that he wants to, that he doesn't see a point in a bunch of choices in deodorant. He says that
he believes in a command economy.
Yeah, a command economy, communist command economy, and people keep saying, don't compare socialism to communism. I don't care what you say. Bernie Sanders is obviously a communist. He's said things of communist nature countless times before. He believes in the centrally planned command economy.
He wants mandatory national service.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. And I was looking at. Going back to Trump quickly, I was looking at this story that just came out actually from InfoWars that Donald Trump is a big supporter of Richard Haas from the CFR, the head of the CFR, and Richard Haas endorsed him. And now going back to Bernie Sanders is, wanting to create these corporate monopolies. So both people on both sides, we're given this idea that these people are both anti-establishment. I don't think either of them are anti-establishment. What do you think?
Well, yeah, Ron Paul actually weighed in on that earlier this week. And said that he thinks that Trump and Sanders are just two different kinds of authoritarians. And he pointed out that they both have supported war in the past. They both seem quite likely to serve the military-industrial complex if elected. And they both believe in a lot of very fascist policies. Sanders is a different flavor of it. Trump is more of a, economic nationalist who wants. You were sort of comparing him to a Mussolini light earlier.
Yeah.
He sounds like that sometimes. I can see.
Not a Nazi. I think people are very off when they call Trump a Nazi.
No.
Because that's socialism. Yes, Trump has a lot of liberal policies, and he does like spending money, to say the least.
He's a hardcore nationalist, and he doesn't have anything in common with the grassroots of the Republican Party. The Republicans are, in theory, supposed to be about a strictly limited constitutional government.
Well, you know what's interesting, though, is he is far from being a conservative, but he's probably the most conservative person running. You know what I mean?
I would say Ted Cruz is more.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, but he also voted for a lot of these Obama bills and legislation.
Ted Cruz has had a shaky voting record, but he also, I don't know, at least when you watch the debates and you watch his rhetoric, he sounds like a real conservative. He sounds like certainly much more of a constitutionalist than anyone else on the stage, which is ironic given the fact that under a strict interpretation of the Constitution, he wouldn't really be able to be the president because he was born in Canada. But I don't know. I see the sleazy side of Cruz for sure, with all the links to Goldman Sachs and
the CFR.
His views on the Federal Reserve are far from those of a true old school Republican who wouldn't want a central bank controlling everything like that. But he is attractive in certain ways, and I can actually see why people like Ted Cruz more than probably any of the other candidates in some ways. But then, I wouldn't have any faith that he would actually be a good president. And he's a huge war hawk, a huge neocon war hawk.
Huge. And you gotta also look at the fact that every president always gets propped up by the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, and all these globalist groups. And I know Trump has said that he has great respect for Richard Haas, head of the CFR, and I know that even Bernie Sanders said that he would imprison Edward Snowden. Bernie Sanders also said that he wants to bring the troops home, but he has still been quite militaristic with his voting record in the past. And Hillary Clinton, how can we even start to talk about Hillary Clinton? Because she is probably one of the most corrupt, horrible people in U.S. politics. And I get it. Like, one of the big points I want to always try to make is that I get it. These people are puppets. Trump, even if he claims that he's not a puppet, and even if he claims that he's all self-funded, which, by the way, he isn't completely self-funded, even if he claims these kinds of things, these guys are always puppets. I mean, when was the last time there was, a president that wasn't a puppet? Like, what, the 1700s? Like, what, Thomas Jefferson? Or, like, it's just insanity. So, where do we even start when we're talking about Hillary Clinton? I mean,
I think WHAM viewers are probably already pretty familiar, but if you just want to tick off some of the major things.
Vince Foster?
Vince Foster's a good place to start, or you could Google Fahmy Malek, the Oklahoma Surgeon General, who declared some very, very strange crime scenes to be suicides that involved enemies of the Clintons or things like that. But if you want to get beyond their personal horrible scandals around them.
Rape record and...
I mean, you have the fact that the most obvious thing to me about Hillary that I would be very, very worried about as a president is the fact that she's essentially a neocon war hawk, which is not surprising in any way that a Democrat would be a neocon war hawk. I think the Obama years have shown us that, if anyone didn't know already. But, she somehow in certain people's minds still has this image of, Hillary's an old hippie and she's part of the peace movement. But I mean, she voted in favor of Gulf War II. She voted in favor of Operation Iraqi Freedom. She was the chief political architect of the destabilization and basic destruction of Libya. she was pushing for that as Secretary of State
as she said, we came, we saw, he died. And
then laughed.
Yeah, and laughed. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's wasn't that from like the Roman Empire or something, that saying, or some kind of dictatorship? But then we look at what else happened in Libya, and thousands of people died. Thousands of people lost their lives. And then she is talking about, yes, we created, Al-Qaeda by, arming and funding and training Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen. And then she's like, and yeah, basically the same thing's happening with ISIS. And she just openly arms, funds, trains ISIS. And she's like, oh yeah, it's just part of the, part of politics, part of foreign policy. And it's just so insane.
Don't criticize it, misogynist.
Oh yeah, well that's another thing. The fact that people should vote for her because she's a woman. I'm fine with voting for a woman in politics. Well, personally, I'm not fine with voting for anyone. I'd rather there not be
if there were
federal governments.
A female candidate with sort of Ron Paul views, I think.
Who actually cares about freedom. Like, this is the whole thing. What right does anyone have to take away my freedom? I never consented to that. No. Just because I was born into, a system where I'm a corporate entity, as my birth certificate says, that doesn't mean that I ever consented to that, and I think that's illegitimate. I don't approve of that, and no matter how many times people are going to say that you are confined by these lacks of freedom here in Canada, and the same goes for those in the United States, I don't consent to that.
The state doesn't own us. We self-own,
Yeah, well, we should be able to take care of ourselves. This collectivism that has become so much more popular in the last few years is terrifying. I mean, I can't believe that I'm looking at the United States and seeing Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, and I'm just thinking more puppets with more intelligent agenda by the establishment in order to infiltrate the groups that are holding out, like myself. I'm not falling for it. I like, as I said, about 85% of what Trump says. I like the politically incorrect stuff. I'm not against the politically incorrect stuff. That's not why I'm against him. I'm against him for the idea of registries. I'm against him for the idea of NSA spying and complete, monitoring and surveillance of the individual. I'm against him for his militarism. I'm against him for his, he wants to increase torture. He wants to, he vowed that he will...
He did flip-flop back on that this week and said that, he won't actually...
Well, what hasn't he flip-flopped on? I think it was Slate. Slate's not a very good media, but Slate said today that he has vowed to, legalize torture. Yeah. And it's
Slate has some good anti-war stuff sometimes, so...
Yeah, but it's getting to the point where it's like, enough of this. Libertarians, come on. Anarchists, come on.
What we come to here in this conversation is those of us who are watching this election... who are able to, analyze the basic themes of it.
Yeah.
If we're libertarian, if we see what people like about a Trump or a Sanders, and why they feel like they're being part of an anti-establishment surge when they support Sanders or Trump, if we can understand what those issues are that are getting people excited in those candidates, how can we present voluntarist solutions to those same issues? So I think one of the obvious biggest issues of this election that is making Sanders and Trump so popular is that people are tired of the economic status quo. Huge unemployment in the United States. You could call it huge even.
Yeah.
They really unfortunately haven't recovered from the 2008 crisis, really, in any tangible, real ways, like people getting back to work and people who lost their homes living in houses again and things like that. I mean, I'm seeing stories all the time out of the States about families living in a storage locker, things like that. I mean, just sad stuff. And you see how the blue-collar jobs especially have just been decimated in the United States.
Yeah.
And somebody like Trump is rightly pointing out at what everyone already knows, hey, like, all these jobs went to China and Mexico with free trade. I was talking earlier with you about how a lot of people are seeing some of the themes of the 1992 election again in this election, where Pat Buchanan was running on a sort of protectionist platform where he wanted to put these heavy tariffs on imports and bring a lot of the manufacturing that was leaving the United States back to the United States.
Yeah.
And then you had Clinton on the other side, who was Mr. NAFTA, and well, obviously we know how all that worked out, and all the factories that moved down to Mexico. So I can see why people are connecting with Trump's message there. Now, is protectionism the answer? You know, people have many different views on that, but I can certainly see how it could help a lot. I'm extremely against sweatshop labor and a lot of the exploitation that goes on in the Asian factories, where so much of the cheap junk sold in North American stores is made. And I really like the idea of bringing back a lot of that manufacturing to North America, and where people will be getting a living wage, or, you know, something decent enough, not slave wages.
Well, and I mean, a lot of these people are bringing this idea of anti-establishmentarianism to the table with Trump and Sanders, and I just want to say that in Sanders' case, a lot of the points that people are making are you know, I understand where they're coming from on it, but you have to understand economics and the market side of things, and a lot of the things that you know, Sanders proposes is actually literally causing the problems that people are talking about. So people are saying, you know, they're against Monsanto. Well, that's a big government monopoly right there. And what you know, Sanders is saying about big pharma, you got to realize that his you know, policies are actually going to lead to you know, a bigger, more massive monopoly with you know, big pharma, and the fact that he's going to be running a $30 trillion deficit, that's okay. I mean,
you know, it'll be higher than whatever.
Well, I mean, Ted Cruz is about $7 trillion deficit, which is already crazy. But you know, Sanders is proposing a $20 trillion deficit, and then with his health plan, it will add up to somewhere around the $30 trillion ballpark, and it's just insane. You know, these same problems that we're saying are the problems, which they are only going to repeat over and over again if we keep giving the wrong remedies. It's like problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialectic. And the same goes for Trump. I mean, Trump was on to something, obviously, when he said that ISIS was armed and funded by the US. And I understand that Trump might not even be a puppet. He will be when they're finished with them. But I don't think that he might have even started off as a puppet. But I think that in the end, he's giving the establishment what they want, more militarism and more collectivism from the Republican ticket. And I think that it's really important for us to remember that while he's talking about how ISIS is armed and funded by the US and talks about taking out ISIS, but at the same time he's like, but we have to ban all Muslims, we have to watch out for that, and at the same time he's going, we have to blow up all these places overseas.
Those are the fascist policies we have to be really worried about with Trump. That's, you know, where these Mussolini comparisons and things are coming from is, you know, he has talked about some extremely fascist policies, not only banning all Muslims from entering the country, which is clearly ridiculous when there's a lot of, you know, Muslims who are just regular, peaceful people that visit the country for all kinds of reasons all the time, and to do that in a, you know, a modern Western country like the United States that has so many Muslim people that have lived there for decades, that are part of the communities there, is ridiculous.
You don't have to go to one extreme or the other.
Also, I mean, clearly we need security right now, but you know, that's going much too far. And I also think that, you know, the U.S. Intelligence agencies know who most of the real terrorists are, because they're the ones who are cooperating with them in so many cases, with the CIA helping out ISIS and the State Department funding them. So if they're really so concerned about, you know, Islamic terror, which is a real concern, they should probably start by stopping funding it, and then see how that works.
Well, and then on top of that, I have to point out the fact that we are talking about something so immature right now, which is like when you're watching the debates, the fact that there are jokes about people, the size of people's hands and the size of their dicks is just absurd. I actually wouldn't mind it so much. I wouldn't mind like the tough talk political incorrectness if Donald Trump made more sense about his policies and actually didn't just say the same talking point over and over again.
That's part of why I think Ted Cruz is coming off so well on the Republican side, is that he'll actually make real points and sometimes often talk like a real statesman and say something sensible and show his knowledge of the topic. And then Donald Trump will just start insulting him. and
Yeah.
say nothing and make no points, and he comes across as not knowing what he's talking about.
And when asked for policy, he's just like, make America great again, make America great again. And he even, like, okay,
He's very
there's one
vague.
point where he made a good point about health insurance, even though that his funding of health insurance would still cost taxpayers about as much as Obama's. But he did say, well, we have to open the borders for competition. I agree with that. But then when he was asked to elaborate by Marco Rubio, who's like one of the biggest robots himself, he's just like, well, we're going to open the borders, make it easier, make it easier, make it easier, make America great again, make America great again, make America classy again, you know, beautiful, huge. And
he
it's
comes
like,
off sounding stupid because the other Rubio and Cruz that he's up there with, you know, whatever their flaws, they both actually know politics and they know how the system works. Whereas Donald Trump is clearly no statesman and has he knows how to, you know, build hotels and casinos. He doesn't know so much about interstate law in the United States and things like that. The point I wanted to get back to with Trump was talking about how we can see some of the appeal of Trump's policies, but there's voluntary solutions to these things that don't involve fascism.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe I'm not entirely against the idea of protectionism if that's what the people in a certain area want.
Yeah.
And they voluntarily decide, okay, we're going to focus on having a locally based economy and we don't want to bring in a lot of imports. I'm not necessarily against that, but another way we can just grow all that naturally without big tariffs on anything coming from China or, you know, whichever country you're talking about, is just support your local economy.
Yeah.
Support the people that are starting the mom and pop businesses locally. Support people that are manufacturing things locally. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, even if the factories, I really doubt that anything is going to happen on the China issue. I don't think there's any political will for that, because I think the big multinational corporations that at the end of the day have a lot more say than Donald Trump is going to have.
Yeah.
You know, that's one point we haven't touched on yet, is that he's probably going to be a hamstrung president if he becomes president, because has almost no support from the Republican establishment, and he's going to get no help from the Mitch McConnells of the world when he's in power and all the rhinos.
Well, we don't want that, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Mitch McConnell's more concerned about helping Obama get the right to use military force anywhere in the world. And of course, the Republicans want to use it when it's their turn again.
Yeah.
But anyway, a way, there's all kinds of ways that we can achieve positive things that touch on the issues that Sanders and Trump are getting people excited about without using coercion.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if people,
it's all about
people
freedom.
want to have, you know, more affordable college, and there's so many, I understand why all the students are excited about Bernie saying, oh, I'll give you free college.
But that's going to inflate the
You're going to
price
have national service too, and we're going to raise everyone's taxes a lot. And, you know, when you get out of college, then get your job, you're going to have to just pay higher taxes for it. It's
well,
not
that, and I mean,
better. But if these people all want cheaper college, why don't they start starting up their own universities? There's so many people.
But besides that, it's a fact that these colleges cost so much money, largely because of the government spending, which inflates the price of the college.
And a lot of them
on
are
top
subsidized by the government as well.
Yeah, and of course, why would we want education by government? Why would we want government giving all of our, you know, entrepreneurs of the future the education and the economics?
Bernie doesn't want you to be an entrepreneur, and when you go to the free college, you're not going to learn about how to start a business. You're going to learn about how to be a Marxist authoritarian apparatchik. If maybe you're getting free college, but what's really the value of an education if you're not learning any useful skills and you just come out of it this bitter, angry person who's deeply into cultural Marxism?
Well, and it's just more authoritarianism on both sides, and I'm just so sick of course, he's going to promote this whole political correct madness that we're watching all over the world right now, where we should just turn a blind eye to reality in order to stop offending people. We just saw Lauren Southern a few days ago get urine dumped on her head in Vancouver for saying scientifically accurate things like man, woman, that kind of thing. And I'm so sick of watching liberals just give away our freedom for the point of feeling comfortable with the words that are said around us. I think that the major point that I want to make in this video is that it's all about freedom and liberty. It's about an end to coercion. It's about you as an individual deciding what you want with your life and not having other people or governments telling you how to live. And that's been the problem for centuries. It's just always getting controlled, and then this deception comes about and says some things that sound shiny and cool, a free pony or something, and then you get screwed. I mean, it's I know this whole issue is open-ended because it's impossible to properly sum up what's happening in society today because it's insanity, but my main point and the bottom line for me is that we should have freedom, we should have liberty, we should be able to control ourselves and control our own commerce and trade, and not have a government that doesn't live in our neighborhood all the way in Washington DC, or in Canada's case Ottawa, deciding what happens for us. It's about us as individuals. I'm not saying that we're going to have mob law. I'm saying that people should decide in their own neighborhoods and communities on their own what they want for their community.
You can have rule of law and still have complete civil liberties for all those who don't victimize others.
Yeah, where's our option to opt out?
And what people need to get back to is thinking, let's start with changing the world with ourselves, because that's what this election is all about, as you touched on a moment ago, is people are being sold the idea of these anti-establishment candidates, and you rebel by voting for this hugely popular person that's been put there for you to see as somebody who identifies with your frustration, but they're not proposing in so many cases the real solutions to the things that you're frustrated about. So people identify with Donald Trump's political incorrectness because they're so tired of the stultifying climate of political correctness. Trump does go too far in many cases and says legitimately offensive things,
or just stupid
but
things.
I can also see why people like him. I mean, like, on the immigration issue, there's there is a major problem with illegal immigration in the United States, not because people from Central America or China or wherever they're coming from are bad people in any way, but because if everybody in the United States, the working people who are already paying into an overloaded welfare system, if they're being forced to foot the bill for massive costs for all these people coming in who also don't have to pay income tax because they're not citizens, that's pretty insane. I mean, the costs, the estimates of it vary what the cost of the undocumented people in the United States is to the taxpayers, but it's at least $350 billion a year, and it's probably much more than that.
And when there's drug cartels coming in and raping women and children and killing people, I mean, it's so easy for us up here to say one thing, but I mean, it's another thing to be living on a border town where, there's cartels coming in.
He wasn't wrong when he talked about kidnappers.
Why would you not defend your land?
I had a conversation with somebody recently where they're so horrified that I was saying, well, yes, there are really violent criminals coming in through the open border from Mexico and committing terrible crimes. And I was just kind of aghast at this person who was so offended, as if I'm racist against Hispanic people. I'm like, no, like, there are large areas of northern Mexico that are controlled by drug cartels now that are just full of brutal violence. If you leave the border open, why would lots of criminals not come in? It would be amazing if they didn't. And one thing Trump is right about is that a lot of the Hispanic voters are supporting him because they came to the United States to get away from all the crime and violence in Mexico.
Same with the Muslims.
They don't want it coming in.
Same with Muslims. They came to escape all the insanity in the Middle East, and now these liberals want to bring in that insanity.
And I want to point out one major thing right now, which is that I don't support Trump's plan of deporting everybody that's in the country illegally, because a lot of them are people that have really blended in with their communities, who are good folks, who are working, often doing the jobs that Americans don't want to do anymore, and they're such hardworking people. I don't think they should be penalized for the fact that they wanted a better life for their family. I actually, years ago when I lived in Quebec, I used to work for a job agency run by a guy from Mexico City that was mostly people from Mexico, El Salvador, places like that. And, don't want to get too much into it, but a lot of the people there were not, didn't exactly have social insurance numbers or anything. They're sending home money to their families. I really loved a lot of these people that I worked with. They're such nice people.
But when they're leeching off of our hard work or something, then there's a big problem.
Yeah, if you come into a country just to go on welfare, when you get there. That is a pretty parasitic attitude.
And
I don't blame people for wanting to try.
And I'm actually enjoying. I went to the mall a few days ago, and I actually really enjoyed seeing all the children walking around in their new winter jackets. The Muslim children from Syria and other places. I was really happy to see that, and it kind of warms your heart. But at the same time, the men. You're not going to save a country by running away from it. And I realize that the United States created a lot of these problems in the first place by bombing innocent people over there and then arming, horrible rebels. I understand that that's a huge part of the problem, and there's so much more to it as well. And I know a lot of these refugees aren't even badly off. They're from Armenia. They have good paychecks. They have cell phones. They have designer jackets. My whole thing is that if you're going to bring bring in the children, please, men, stay back and fight for your country.
But I don't think a lot of the men that are coming into Europe that are causing problems with things like what we saw in Cologne and stuff, I don't think even a lot of them are regular refugees fleeing Syria and the war.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these are just U.S. wind-up toy guys, basically. We know for a fact that they transferred a whole bunch of jihadis from Libya to Syria on military flights, and now these people are having to get out of Syria because Russia's actually bombing them now and actually trying to fight them, unlike the US and Canada were fighting ISIS last year. I think I would be amazed if there are not many real US-backed jihadis coming into Germany now, and Sweden and places like that, and France, when we see what's going on in the streets with just chaos and people, defecating all over people's lawns and having rallies calling for killing Jews and gays and Christians and calling for Sharia law in Norway. There's no way this isn't part of the same programs that we've seen deployed
as per usual,
Libya and Syria to destroy.
Of course, well, as per usual, I think that it's a script. I think most of what we see is a script, and I think that one of the reasons that it's hard to break down everything, because some things do not, like, they appear one way, but they're a totally different way, and some things aren't what they seem. And I think Donald Trump isn't what he seems when it comes to.
And his going back to the immigration issue, his plan to build a wall. I do think it's funny that it's being viewed by so many people as so crazy and so far outside the Overton window right now, when, many countries do have border walls. And if you go back 10, 12 years ago, there was bipartisan support for building a wall on the Mexican border. Democrats were calling for it too. Now everybody acts like it's so ridiculous. Now, I don't think a wall's the answer, because I see the voluntarist solution to it is to stop incentivizing people to come. Because the Obama administration's been openly incentivizing millions of people to come from Central America. They actually have ads in the newspapers in Central American countries saying, go to the U.S., you'll get in the DREAM program and all this stuff.
Same within Muslim countries.
They're incentivizing, which is deeply irresponsible, just from a standpoint of like the safety of all the children and stuff that are getting sent up on that big train, the Beast, through Mexico, where, it's a really unsafe journey, and a lot of them get sold into human trafficking, that their parents were trying to send them to the U.S. for a better life, but they just disappear, and who knows what they end up in, just horrible things, I'm sure. So it's very irresponsible to incentivize people to come, and that to me is the real answer, not a wall, is, I'm not against the movement of people, as many anarchists would point out. I'm not against the free movement of people, but I'm against the placing of all the burden of immigrants who aren't working on the people who are the local taxpayers. That's wrong.
Suffice to say, though, it's another crazy election, and I don't know how to exactly wrap it up.
We're screwed no matter what.
I mean, our freedoms are screwed either way, and it's up to us as individuals to fight it and to do everything we can and stop falling for false prophets, people. Come on. So there is a lot more to be said, of course, but this video is getting very long here. So we're going to wrap it up, but I'm sure we'll be talking about it more. I mean, it's going to be impossible to avoid it. There are so many issues coming up, and of course it seems like a script as per usual, which 99.999% sure it is, especially when Hillary Clinton's involved, and then Donald Trump, and all these people that are usually anti-establishment are suddenly going out and voting for the lesser of the evil, which is still evil. And it's not going to get us anywhere. What's going to save us is us standing up for our individual rights, our freedoms, our liberties, and our natural rights that we're born with, because government doesn't give us our freedom. We have our freedom from birth, and we should exert that and do everything in our power to stand up against this insane new world order that's being created around us, and that just keeps getting smarter and more intelligent in their way of controlling us. And remember, it's always about people competing to control us, and I don't consent to being controlled. I will happily control myself. Thank you very much. So, John, thank you very much. And this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.